Hello everyone, welcome to China's Politics, and today we're talking about the breakdown of U.S.-South Korea relations. Support Chinese chips to the world. The United States and South Korea to determine the relationship is an alliance? The answer is false. Recently, the United States robbed South Korea of $7 trillion investment. South Korea retaliated by heavily fining 2 U.S. companies. The current president of South Korea, both during his election and after his victory, has been a staunch advocate of the Korea-U.S. alliance. He said that only by relying on the power of the U.S., South Korea can gain greater benefits. But the truth is completely different from what Yoon Seok-yeol expected, and instead of bringing gains to Korea, the U.S. has become an exploiter of Korea's interests. In the face of the U.S. advancement, South Korea finally could not stand it and made strong countermeasures. Some time ago, the U.S. media published news that U.S. Secretary of Commerce Raimondo had snatched away $5 billion worth of investment that belonged to South Korea with a single phone call. This investment, if converted into Korean won, would amount to $7,000 billion. The U.S. side reported this news as a political achievement of the U.S. government. But from Korea's point of view, the U.S. approach seriously undermines Korea's interests. Although South Korea is an important ally of the U.S. in East Asia, the U.S. never lets go of South Korean interests when it can. In addition to intercepting investments that originally belonged to Korea, the U.S. has also used the Inflation Reduction Act to go after Korea's electric car industry, resulting in a potentially huge loss to the Korean economy. Both the Korean media and the aviation public are very unhappy with the U.S. side's behavior. Such behavior is tantamount to a betrayal in the view of the Korean side. The Korean side did not choose to sit on its hands under the U.S. side's aggression, but decided to take strong countermeasures. The South Korean government elaborated a hefty fine of up to 100 billion won to Google and Meta for violating the Personal Assets Protection Act. At the same time, the Korean government also placed restrictions on the form of operation of the two companies. If they want to collect and use the information of Korean users, they must have the permission of the users by explaining the relevant information to them. Although the fines are high, they are still not comparable to the $5 billion investment lost by South Korea. The Chinese government's purpose in taking this action is primarily to demonstrate that South Korea will not continue to be slaughtered by the United States. South Korea is not only the weaker party in the Korea-U.S. relationship, but also often plays the role of the sacrificial lamb. In order to contain China's chip trade and chip technology development, the United States once tried to include South Korea in the four-party chip alliance, but this is extremely detrimental to the development of South Korea's chip industry, so the Korean side did not agree to the U.S. invitation. The U.S. Inflation Reduction Act, the South Korean companies can be described as a complete betrayal. According to the Korean media, in August, U.S. President Joe Biden evaluated the bill as a victory for the United States, but there is no doubt that this victory belongs only to the United States, and it came at the expense of Korean car companies. Just 3 months after the Korea-U.S. summit and the announcement of the economic alliance, the U.S. excluded Korea in the bill, which is not a clear betrayal of Korea by the U.S. This is a clear indication that South Korea has been betrayed by the United States. In this regard, the Korean government and auto companies are also very angry and embarrassed. It is worth noting that the Inflation Reduction Act clearly stipulates that only electric vehicles produced in North America can receive subsidies from the U.S. government, and all others are excluded from the scope of subsidies. Currently in the United States electric car market occupies the second place, is the South Korean Hyundai and Kia new energy vehicles. The first is Tesla. Obviously, the U.S. move is a deliberate distinction between local and foreign companies, ostensibly called subsidies, but in fact is a disguised suppression of the development of Korean car companies. For this reason, the Korean government has recently sent a joint delegation to the United States to negotiate the resolution of the Inflation Reduction Act. However, some analysts believe that the efforts made by Korea are likely to be in vain in the face of the extreme egoism of the United States. Similarly, it is precisely because of this bill that Korean car companies have suffered unfair treatment, and in order to protect the interests of the Korean side, the Korean government is currently considering, if necessary, the U.S. bill to the World Trade Organization. It is easy to see that South Korea was betrayed by the United States to completely turn the other cheek. Don't forget, when Biden offered this tough move, the purpose of signing the Inflation Reduction Act was to target China, but I didn't know that a knife was stuck in the back of South Korea. Since the Yoon Seok-yeol administration took office, it has been actively responding to the U.S. call to join various cabals to contain China, but it was eventually betrayed by the U.S. Because of the deep betrayal by the U.S., the voices of South Korea to strengthen the supply chain cooperation between China and South Korea are getting louder and louder. It is reported that Korea has been running a trade deficit with China for 4 consecutive months, and if it wants to achieve structural interaction between the supply chain of China and Korea, it should take a reasonable view of its own position in the game between China and the U.S., and should maintain its competitive advantage against China through a series of innovations, rather than technological competition. Thus, South Korea has found it more reliable to cooperate with China after being betrayed by the United States. From another point of view, the United States to South Korea's backstab may also lead to the so-called CHIP quadrilateral alliance completely bankrupt. After all, if the new U.S. Inflation Reduction Act requirements, South Korea's new energy automotive companies will certainly suffer a fatal blow. Likewise, because South Korea's semiconductor companies in China's earnings are very large, and the current main market for Korean semiconductors in China, and the United States to form a CHIP quadrilateral alliance in order to cut off China in the semiconductor industry chain. During his visit to China, Park Jin exchanged views with Wang Yi on a number of issues. The first point is clear that South Korea will continue to maintain ties with China, its largest trading partner. Second, the U.S. is forming a CHIP quadrilateral alliance, and whether South Korea will participate in this alliance depends on 2 important factors. Each country must respect the One China principle and not restrict exports to China. And these conditions are clearly contrary to the wishes of the United States. In the end, South Korea knows very well that many of its chip exports are sold to China, and if it goes along with the United States and decouples from China in the field of chips, then the losses will be borne by South Korea itself. Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi also put forward 5 shoulds, hoping that South Korea can continue to work hard and work with China to promote China-South Korea relations to a better 30 years. The reason for mentioning 30 years is that this year coincides with the 30th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between China and South Korea. Through these years of cooperation, Korea should be very clear that cooperation with China has really brought a lot of benefits to Korea. This is why such exchanges and cooperation should be maintained, and South Korea should not abandon China as a partner just because the United States is in the middle of it, but South Korea needs to start from its own interests and not step on the American chariot just to cater to the United States. China has always maintained close trade relations with its neighbors and welcomed investment from all countries with an open attitude of cooperation, which is the main reason why China has achieved such brilliant results in its economic development. Once South Korea joins the U.S. alliance to restrict China, then South Korea's own interests will be seriously damaged, while the relationship between China and South Korea will also be seriously affected. So whether from the perspective of economic development or national security, South Korea's decision to restrict product exports to China is wrong.